Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Crossing the Line. We're going to be taking a look at the referendum results here in Australia after last night and yesterday's vote. This is groundbreaking news. This is fantastic news for us here in Australia. The Voice referendum has come back with the resounding no, and I couldn't be happier about it. I know a lot of other Indigenous people that are very happy about it as well, and I am dead set ecstatic that it's been beaten back. This is just a push for the government to get more power over the Australian people, to divide us, make us weak, and separate us along the lines of race and creed. Now, we've got the stats here from The Guardian on the referendum, and this just goes to show you how little people in inner city suburbs and that know what the hell is going on around the country, and it proves my point that those people in inner cities shouldn't be allowed to vote. I mean, unless you contribute to society and you don't just sit there using up resources like them, we need to stop them from voting. I don't know. It's not going to happen, but it just goes to show you, these results here go to show you how badly they are informed in inner city suburbs. You can see a resounding no vote has come through. Massive amount of respect to everyone that voted no. I can't believe even Victoria won out with a no vote. The ACT is the only one that has voted yes in this referendum by the looks of it, and it's a 39.2 no to 60.8% said yes. This is the just goes to show the people in Canberra, the people who live in the ACT, have no idea what the government, what the Australian people want. It only knows what the government wants. But we're going to have a breakdown on this electoral vote map here. As you can see, all of Australia, basically, besides a couple of little bits of green there in the ACT and down in, was it Hobart area or Tasmania there, orange, and we all voted no. Northern Territory, 44% said yes, 55.86% said no, and that's about 60% of the votes so far of filming this anyway. And it just goes to show you, even in Adelaide, they voted no. But we'll have a look. If you can see here, any of these major major like city centres and that, they're the only ones that have voted yes for this. Canberra, 70%. Bean 55 that's barely just made it through as well. 57. I don't even know where that is. It's Sydney area. Major city suburbs have all voted yes. And then as soon as you start getting out of the city centre, as soon as you start getting out of that propaganda district that they can just pump that into you, and those people who have no idea what they're doing anyway, it just shows you the Australian people who actually progress the country don't live in the middle of the city. You can see Newcastle. There's a few little green spots around the map. We'll go up to where are we? We'll go up to Brisbane Valley. Yeah, it just goes to show you they have no idea what's going on, and the amount of, let's see if we go up north. Oh, no, they're all orange. What about Perth? No, orange again. Oh no, there we go. Yeah, green in the city centre. That's about it. And Darwin, I don't think it really has a spot. It's just no. All no's. That's fantastic news yet again. But we see down in Hobart, Franklin area, Tasmania, that only a small percentage of them voted yes as well. It's amazing. I'm so happy that this has happened, because the amount of power the government would have taken from us, the amount of power that they would have given themselves, the amount of people they would have put on the payroll, the massive unknown that was going with this referendum. They were trying to pull a swift one on us, and the Australian people actually banded together and said, no, we've had enough. Now, some breaking news out of New Zealand as well. They have voted out their COVID agenda government. I don't know what you want to call them, but they're a massive leftist government. Jacinda Ardern, Chris Hipkins, that government, they have voted them out, and they have put in a right-wing prime minister and right-wing government, there. And I think this may just be the Australians and the New Zealanders coming to their senses and pushing back a little bit and not putting up with this complete go woke, go broke nonsense that they keep pushing down our throat. I mean, every time they bring out some sort of agenda, it's about woke politics. It's got nothing to do with helping anyone here in this country or helping anyone abroad. It's only got to do with making us look woke to the rest of the world. I've seen stories coming out today because the no votes prevailed, saying that we're going to look pretty bad on the world stage. We're not out there bombing Palestinians. We're not out there massacring Israelis. We're not out there blowing up Ukrainians or drone bombing Russians. We're not doing any of that. Our government may be sending them some troops and some supplies and money, but how can we look bad to the world when the rest of the world is kicking off to World War III right now? I really don't care what these people want to label us as. I don't give a shit. They don't live here. They don't vote here. Their taxpayer dollars do not come here. They have no say in what we do in our country. I do get a little bit of joy about it, this no vote going through. I honestly thought they were going to push it through. I honestly thought they were going to just say, we don't care. We'll just put it through anyway. It turns out I was kind of right. The voice referendum results in South Australia seem to be getting rejected by the people, by the government there. We got the story here from news.com.au. A state will introduce the voice despite the referendum fail. Australians may resoundingly rejected the voice proposal, but one state is pressing ahead with the reform despite the result. Australians may have been resoundingly rejected the voice proposal, but South Australia is pressing ahead with the reform despite the result. South Australia Premier Peter Malinoukis, or whatever it is, has already legislated state-based implementation of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, Voice, Treaty and Truth. But by the resounding vote against the proposal, including South Australia, has sparked calls to repeal the legislation. South Australians have voted clearly against the voice to Parliament. Now it's up to Peter to explain where to from here. South Opposition Leader David Spears said, the South Australian voice will not have any powers to veto legislation or stop Parliament undertaking its duties and functions, but it can engage in the South Australian government, including Cabinet and Cabinet Ministers and Chief Executive of the government departments. And will meet the South Australian Cabinet at least twice per year. So advanced is the introduction of the voice in South Australia. Its inaugural First Nations voice election can be held on Saturday, the 16th of March 2024. So our voices have been heard and we all said no, and the South Australian government just brings it upon themselves to ignore their voters, ignore the referendum tally, and just go ahead and do it anyway. And I would not be surprised if they're not going to be the only ones that are doing it. I can see Victorian government doing it. I can see the Western Australian government doing it. Maybe even New South Wales. Who knows? They may not have won the referendum, but don't put that aside. They will push this shit through. They are going to break their promises and just slide it in under the table without anyone knowing. If this is going to happen, we are in for a hell of a fight. And I mean fight where it actually comes to physical violence. If these people ignore the referendum, ignore what the whole Australian public has said, the majority of the public, we are not a democracy anymore. If they just go and take our votes and wipe their asses with them and say, we don't care what you said, we are not a democracy and we need to instill fear back into the government so they actually follow through with what they promise, do what we tell them to do, because that's how it works. I don't think many people realize is we give them the power and we tell them what to do with that power. They don't tell us what to do. That's not the way it's supposed to work. We let them do their job. And if they're not doing their job, we take them out of power and put someone in place who does do their job. This is the way it's supposed to work. This is the way it hasn't worked as long as I've been alive, I'd say. This is not going to be the end of the voice. This is just going to be the start of it. Treaty in Victoria. Meanwhile, Victoria is pressing ahead to become the first state to commence a treaty process with Aboriginal people. Maybe I should move to Victoria and just claim a whole bunch of land rights. And maybe, I might get some money out of it. That might end well. No way in hell am I living in Victoria. No formal treaty has ever been signed between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and the British Australian governments. However, Victoria, arguably the home to the first attempted treaty between the First Nations people and European settlers when Grazier John Batman sailed across the Bass Strait to encourage the Wurundjeri and Burunong and Wattarong peoples near the Yarra River in 1835. The document, which he claimed was signed by tribal elders and amounted to treaty, ceded to him over 200,000 hectares of land in exchange for blankets, knives, flour, and scissors. The treaty was later annulled by proclamation of the government. That day, nearly 200 years later, the Victorian government passed the Treaty Act, Australia's first ever treaty law. The Treaty Act sets out a roadmap towards the treaty negotiations, outlining protocols that give the practical application of the guiding principles set out by advancing the treaty process with Aboriginal Victorians Act 2018. First People's Assembly has paid tribute to the outgoing Victoria Premier Daniel Andrews for introducing the reforms. Of course he did. He is nothing but a communist dictator and a shill for the WEF. Daniel Andrews' stain left on this country, left on our politics, left on Victorian people, will never go away. The things he has done to this country are mired in mud and muck, and they will stick to anyone who touches them. He is a pest, he is a virus, and he should not have ever been elected to any form of state government or anything like that here in Australia. But the communist people of Victoria, the uneducated, the vegan-toting greenies, I don't care what you are. If you're voting for Daniel Andrews, you're an absolute uninformed moron, and you should have your rights removed from you because you were killing people and you were destroying this country. If you want to live in a totalitarian dictatorship or a communist Australia, you can actually pack your bags and you can go and move to China and fucking live there for all I care. This voice hasn't ended. This will not stop here. They have been given the answer that they didn't want. It's a no, and they don't care. Democracy doesn't matter to these people. Our voice, the voice of the people who have spoken up and said no, resoundingly no, in a landfall. Look at that. A landfall of people have said no. And they are ignoring it. 60.6% of people here in the NT, 39.2%, 68.7% here in Queensland, 63% in WA, 64% in South Australia. New South Wales astounded me. I honestly thought they would be going yes with this. But it's amazing how many people come out and said no. And they are ignoring us. They're ignoring what we've said. They're ignoring what we've told them to do. And they're just doing it off their own bat. They don't care what we say. So why should we care what they say? If they get to break the rules and just ignore democracy, so should we. We just get to ignore that they said that we're not allowed firearms, we're not allowed to protect ourselves, that we're not allowed to fish in certain areas, we're not allowed to go onto certain parts of the country, we're not allowed to do. We should just ignore the rule of the land because that's what they're doing. We said no, and they said we don't care. This is what needs to happen. Calls for Anthony Albanese to resign after his massive failure with the referendum. Story here from news.com.au. The immediate impact of Anthony Albanese's political future has become a major talking point after the Australian resoundingly voted no. Several Liberal politicians and Conservative commentators are calling for Anthony Albanese to resign in the wake of the referendum. I am calling for him to resign as well, and I know a lot of other people are as well. We want that $400 million you just wasted on this referendum back, and we want you to pay the consequences of your stupid actions and resign, and I want you to step down. I do not want you to get a pension. You do not get any benefits from the government. You do not get your $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year benefit pension from the government, because if you have to tell people that you're worth $500,000 a year in a pension, but then they have to scrimp and scrape by, that's pathetic. That's disgusting. You should not get anything from the Australian people. You've taken enough from us. South Australia's opposition leader David Spears said the Labor Party needed to make a call on Albanese's future today. Some people are saying he should resign. He should resign. The damage he has done to our country and to the very fabric of what it means to be Australian is quite frankly heartbreaking, Mr. Spears said. The Prime Minister should think about his future. I don't think he will resign, but there are international precedents there. Sky News host Andrew Bolt suggested the Prime Minister should go for subject Australia to the poison of the referendum during a fiery clash over the fallout of the Yes wipeout. I just wonder now how he can continue as Prime Minister. He's put us through a nightmare and wasted nearly $400 million of our money, putting Australians at each other's throats, and unfortunately poison from all this will survive. The Australian columnist Simon Benson wrote, the consequences for Albanese are unknown. Failure of the referendum doesn't necessarily go to the fatality of leadership, but it should. Benson wrote, the question is whether there is a residual effect that goes on to a broader issue of political competence and judgment. Political incompetence is his bread and butter. He can't even put together a coherent sentence without slurring his words and just ignoring the question at hand. He walks away when he gets asked something too controversial that he just doesn't have an answer lined up for. Spends 90% of his time at friggin' soccer matches, cricket matches and shit, drinking piss. I mean, that's what we'd all love to be able to do, but we're too busy trying to fucking go to work and put fuel in our car every day. Yesterday we went shopping and just spent $500 at the fucking Coles. And you're going around wasting $400 million. You should resign. You should be sent to fucking Christmas Island or something. I don't know. Put him offshore. Harold Holt him. Drag him out to sea and leave him there. He could float out there in his $400 million worth of bullshit he just spread. The Prime Minister is damaged by this, no question, but for how long and where we go now tackling Indigenous disadvantage, let alone from every form of recognition in the Constitution, remains very unclear, Spears says in the ABC News Breakfast. Cry harder. While politics back and forth will continue, Spears said that the country needs healing. This has been particularly painful for the First Nations people. In particular, a path forward is unclear. The government won't rush to say, okay, here is plan B, but they have ultimately come up with something to deal with the issues that have been exposed and debated over the last 6 weeks, particularly closing the gap. If you want to close the gap, you need to go out to those communities where those people are suffering. They do not have a home. They do not have any security. They are living in the streets. They're living in creek beds. They're living in dirt. They do not have any medical needs. You need to go out there where there is no infrastructure and either build the infrastructure or move them from there to where somewhere they can be safe, where they can be secure, where they can get food and shelter and medical care. There is no other way about it. You can't just sit there saying, oh, how do you feel about that? If they get to make a choice, they need to make the choice whether they move and come into society or they live out in the middle of nowhere with no infrastructure and no supplies. Because we can't just go and build an oasis in the middle of the desert with the amount of debt this country's in, the amount of money that the government wastes. If we had the money and the means to, I'd be all for putting a city out in the middle of nowhere for people to live and infrastructure out there for those people. But they waste too much money. They're sending it overseas to Ukraine. Ukraine is using it to bomb people in fucking Africa now. It's insane that they just, oh, well, no one wants to help us, Aboriginal people. It's all racist. Everyone's racist now. Bullshit. If you want to help Aboriginal people, go out there to those communities where they live and help them. Don't just sit there in your inner city drinking fucking chai lattes, bullshitting and texting people on your fucking phone that was built by Chinese slave labor saying how oppressed you are and you feel bad for the local Indigenous people. Disgusting. Mr. Albanese said the result did not define Australia, will not divide us, he said. You divided us over the last 12 months, 10 months. You divided this country when you locked everyone down, when all the COVID bullshit you put us through and still putting us through now. Then you divided us again with this voice to parliament bullshit. If you'd actually come out with a plan on how you were going to implement things, people might have voted yes. But when you come out and say that we don't know what it's going to be, we're going to make it up after the vote goes through, we'll just figure something out then, that's bullshit. You had 10 months from the start of this to come up with something and you had nothing. No wonder you lost. People want to help Aboriginal people. The entire country does. The entire country wants to help Indigenous people. The only thing I've ever seen anyone do to help Indigenous people is Centrelink, a few bonuses and stuff here and there, home loans, and that doesn't do shit. If you want to actually go and help people, you have to go out to those communities. You have to drag them out of the creek bed that they're wallowing in and can't get out of because they're literally living in a creek bed under a tree, under a piece of tin or something, and you need to physically help them. They're having massive issues with alcoholism, spousal abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse, rape, crime. You name it. Look at Alice Springs. The Alice Spring crime rate is insane. People can't leave their homes some nights. You go to a community where an Aboriginal person dies and they shut down all the bottle-os and they shut down all the shops and you can't go out for fucking 2 or 3 days because they're in mourning and because they go and get drunk and beat the shit out of anyone they find, beat the shit out of each other and then ransack the town. It's a very common practice. And you're sitting there saying, no, it's because everyone who voted no is racist. I'm Aboriginal, I voted no. I know a lot of other Aboriginal Indigenous people that voted no, and you're sitting there calling them racist too? Or are we just too stupid to understand? What is it? Because either way, I think you're calling us racist. Jesus Christ. This referendum is not going to end here. This is not going to be the last we hear of it. They're just going to push this stuff through anyway. We can see that there. The voice referendum, South Australia and Victoria are already pushing it through. What happened to the democracy here in Australia? What happened to one vote, one voice? What happened to you guys abiding by our choice? We're living in fairyland now. They just get to make up their own rules. We don't apply. We don't need to apply. They don't care what we say. They're just going to do whatever they want to do anyway. It's insane. What do you guys think anyway? Let me know down in the comments below and I'll see you in the next episode. Don't forget to leave a like, a share and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below and I'll see you guys in the next video.